Hey everybody, welcome back to Canadian Politics. Today we're going to talk about the carbon tax. The purpose of a carbon tax is to act as a pollutant fee. For example, when a business releases pollutants that are liquid or solid, they're issued fines for that action. Let's say, for example, that a business makes certain toxic chemicals and that occasionally the byproduct of their manufacture means that harmful chemicals are released into the surrounding land. The release will be documented, an amount estimated, and then a fine for their release will be levied by the government. This could include an action plan for how to contain or clean up the chemicals, and that will be part of the economic penalty. When it comes to airborne pollutants, the system is much more difficult. For one, the pollutants released into the air may be difficult to weigh, and the environmental impact may be difficult to ascertain because the pollutants may move in unexpected ways. In addition to this, some businesses necessarily release airborne pollutants. It's part of the regular cycle of business. For example, during the process of refining oil, there will be necessarily some amount of pollutants released into the air. It's not a spill, it's not an accident, it's just part of being in that sector doing that work. So a carbon tax acts as a pollutant fine for industries which release airborne pollutants. In some ways, this is a more fair system because industries that release liquid or solid pollutants have had to pay fines for decades. The reason this is a tax rather than an environmental fine is that the emissions are a product of the normal function of business. There's no current way to produce what they do without these emissions. I hear a lot of people asking, why is Canada starting to have a carbon tax? Why are we doing it here? Well, there are several countries around the world that have adopted a carbon tax. These include Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Japan, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Mexico, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Singapore, Slovenia, South Africa, Sweden, Switzerland, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. This shows that many of the world's industrial countries have come to a similar conclusion, that disincentivizing carbon release is one way of combating climate change, and that climate change is worth combating. Let's look at some examples now to see why a carbon tax was needed and why we couldn't just integrate airborne pollutants into our current environmental fine structure. So, as an example, refining a barrel of oil will release between 14 and 62 kilograms of CO2. Suncor Refinery in Edmonton refines 146,000 barrels per day. This means between 2 million and 9 million kilograms of CO2. If we use the regular environmental fines, Suncor would pay $2 million per day of refining, and that fine doubles to $4 million per day for repeat and subsequent offenses. This is why we couldn't just integrate airborne pollutants into our existing structure, because this isn't a spill, it's not accidental. This exhaust is the result of normal operation, and so a compromise was born, the carbon tax. So let's talk about the carbon tax rebate. The rebate is a way for the government to ensure that the consumer is not shouldering the brunt of the carbon tax, because that's not the major goal of the carbon tax. The goal is to gradually incentivize a switch to cleaner energy. Consumers are rebated a certain amount based on their province and whether they live in a city or rural area. The goal is for the government to take the carbon taxes collected from major polluters and give much of it back to the consumers. This means that companies cannot simply pass the expenses on to their customers. In many provinces, the rebate will exceed the expected cost increases. So, where does that leave us? The carbon tax is a step in the right direction. Even if you disagree with its implementation or scope, the spirit of the tax is in the right place. And let's be clear, no one is suggesting the carbon tax is the best possible idea, or that a new, better idea can't be found. Figuring out a way to account for these pollutants is relatively new, and a new system for taxing or disincentivizing them could be found in the future. As always, there are no easy answers when it comes to Canadian politics.